Please
Get
stop
up, you
kicking
incompetent
me,
fool!
Carla shouted as she shielded herself behind
Useless!
the
You're
counter.
fired!
Her arms instinctively covering
This is
her
unacceptable.
face.
Where is the manager?
The man
Sir,
in
I
the
apologize.
expensive
I don't
suit
want
continued
excuses.
to advance,
Get out of my sight.
his anger
The
growing
evidence is
by
clear.
the
We have
second.
witnesses.
No, this is a
You
setup. I
incompetent
saw everything.
fool.
It's on record.
Your choice,
You
settle
spilled
or court.
$300 worth
Yes,
of
the deal
wine
is
on my
finalized.
shirt.
No issues.
This is
The
outrageous. I
Green
demand to
Valley
see the
restaurant
manager.
had come
Sir,
to a
please calm
complete
down.
standstill. Forks suspended in midair. Conversations interrupted. All eyes fixed on the scene unfolding at table 12. Roberto Mendez, a businessman known in the city for his real estate deals, was out of control after Carla accidentally bumped into his chair while serving the next table. Carla Santos, 29, had been working at Green Valley for 3 years. She was the kind of employee who arrived early, stayed late, and never complained about overtime. A single mother of a 7-year-old daughter, she had turned every shift into an opportunity to save for the business degree she dreamed of pursuing. But at that moment, cowering behind the counter, she looked like nothing more than a helpless woman. People like, "You shouldn't even be working in a decent place," Roberto continued, his voice echoing through the room. "Go back to the slum where you came from." What no one noticed was the man in the corner of the restaurant. Sitting alone at table 23, wearing a simple shirt and faded jeans, he had witnessed the entire sequence of events. His eyes, however, showed no shock or indignation like the others present. There was something different there, a calculating calm that only someone accustomed to observing and analyzing complex situations could maintain. Fernando Silva was 45 years old and drove an old pickup truck. At least that was how everyone knew him in Green Valley, where he had been dining twice a week for 6 months. He always ordered the same dish, always left a generous tip, always treated all the staff with genuine respect. Carla had noticed that he observed a lot. The movement of the restaurant, how the staff worked, how the customers behaved. Is anyone going to do something? Or are you going to let this savage destroy other people's property? Roberto yelled, gesturing aggressively toward Carla, who was now crying silently. That's when Fernando stood up. Not quickly, not dramatically, just a person getting up to pay his bill. But something in his movements made Roberto stop yelling for a few seconds. "Excuse me," Fernando said calmly, walking over to table 12. His voice was unaltered, but it carried a natural authority that made the entire restaurant fall even more silent. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding here." Roberto turned to him with disdain. "And who the hell are you, the boyfriend of this? I'm just someone who saw exactly what happened," Fernando replied, his eyes meeting Carla's for a brief moment. She noticed something in that look. Not pity, not indignation, but a kind of silent recognition. Fernando had been watching Roberto for weeks, not just that night, but on multiple occasions. And what he saw made him make a decision that would completely change the lives of everyone in that restaurant. As Roberto continued his insults now directed at Fernando as well, Carla noticed something peculiar. Despite all the humiliation she was suffering, there was a strange serenity growing inside her. As if this terrible moment was just the beginning of something much bigger. If you're enjoying this story of injustice and reversal, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple moment of humiliation would become the catalyst for a change that no one would ever forget. "I told you to get out of my way," Roberto yelled, pushing Carla away from the table. "People like you don't understand politeness. They only understand force." The restaurant manager, Mr. Peterson, finally appeared. But his expression showed more concern for calming Roberto than protecting his employee. "Mr. Mendez, please, let's resolve this in a civilized manner." "Civilized?" Roberto laughed scornfully. This person destroyed a shirt that costs more than her annual salary. And you want me to be civilized? Carla remained silent, discreetly wiping away the tears that insisted on falling. This wasn't the first time she had faced racial humiliation at work, but it had never been so public, so cruel. In recent months, since Roberto had become a regular customer, she had been called incompetent, lazy, and other much worse terms when she thought no one was listening. What hurt the most was remembering her daughter Isabella, asking her the week before why Mommy always came home sad after work. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that some people hate you simply for existing? You know what the problem with you people is. Roberto continued, now addressing the entire restaurant, as if it were a stage. You think you deserve to be in decent places without earning it. I built my empire from scratch, working 16 hours a day for years. Fernando watched every word, every gesture, every reaction of the people around him. He had spent the last 6 months studying not only Roberto, but the entire ecosystem of that restaurant. He knew that Roberto was the son of an influential politician, that he had inherited his father's construction company at the age of 25, and that his 16-hour workdays consisted mainly of business lunches and golf courses. But what impressed Fernando most was how Carla reacted to each attack. She didn't yell back. She didn't defend herself aggressively. Instead, she maintained a quiet dignity that he had only seen in people who had survived much worse things. There was something in her eyes that reminded him of his own mother, who had worked as a maid for years to pay for his education. Do you know how much money I bring into this restaurant every month? Roberto now addressed Mr. Peterson directly. I bring in important clients. I host corporate events here, and this incompetent employee is going to cost more money than she will ever generate. Carla felt something break inside her. It wasn't just the humiliation, but the realization that she was losing the job she desperately needed. Isabella was starting to ask questions about why they couldn't buy the same school supplies as the other children. The health insurance that the restaurant offered was the only medical protection they had. Mr. Peterson, she said for the first time, her voice trembling, but firm. I can pay for the shirt. You don't have to take it out of my salary all at once. I can pay in installments. You will pay, Roberto interrupted. And you will pay with interest for my lost time. It was at this moment that Fernando made a decision. Not because he felt sorry for Carla. He had observed her competence, her dedication, her respectful way of treating all customers for months. She was exactly the kind of person he liked to work with. But Roberto represented everything Fernando despised in the business world. Excuse me, Fernando said again, this time louder. May I suggest a solution to this problem? Roberto turned around irritably. I already told you this is none of your business. Who do you think you are? Fernando smiled slightly. It was an interesting question. Who was he? Officially, Fernando Silva was the CEO of Silva Holdings, a company that had acquired more than 200 establishments in the last 5 years. His acquisitions always followed a pattern. Locations with potential, but which were being poorly managed or had management problems. I'm just someone who understands business, Fernando replied calmly. And I can assure you that you are about to make a very costly mistake. Mistake? Roberto laughed. The only mistake here was this place hiring people who don't know their place. Carla watched the exchange between the two men with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. Something about Fernando's behavior intrigued her. He spoke with natural authority, like someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. But what impressed her most was the absolute calm he maintained, as if this whole situation was exactly what he had been expecting. "Mr. Mendes," Fernando continued, "let me ask you a question. How much do you think your reputation is worth?" Roberto frowned, clearly confused by the change in direction of the conversation. What Roberto didn't know was that Fernando had spent the last few weeks not only observing the restaurant, but also thoroughly researching the lives of all the problematic regular customers. And about Roberto Mendes, he had discovered some very interesting things. Things that a man so concerned with his public image would definitely not want to become public knowledge. Each new humiliation Roberto poured on Carla only strengthened something inside Fernando that his oppressors couldn't see. A quiet determination fueled by the very injustice they tried to normalize. What that privileged man didn't know was that each act of contempt was writing his own sentence of defeat, and that Fernando was about to teach him a lesson on the true meaning of the word power. "My reputation." Roberto laughed loudly, attracting even more attention from the other customers. "My reputation is untouchable. I'm a member of the most exclusive club in town. I own 3 companies and I have connections that these people can only dream of." Fernando nodded slowly as if digesting every word. "Interesting. And all these achievements were built on your own merits?" "Of course," Roberto replied indignantly. "Unlike people like her, I worked hard to get where I am." Carla watched the conversation with growing curiosity. There was something about the way Fernando spoke that reminded her of documentaries she watched with Isabella about professional negotiators. Each question seemed to have a purpose, as if he were leading Roberto somewhere specific. "Mr. Peterson," Roberto turned to the manager. "I want that employee fired now, and if that doesn't happen, I'm going to withdraw all my corporate contracts from this establishment." The manager swallowed hard. Roberto really brought in a considerable amount of money to the restaurant, especially with business lunches and company events. "Mr. Mendes, maybe we can find a solution that satisfies everyone. The only solution is for her to leave." Roberto slammed his fist on the table. "People like her need to learn that there are consequences for incompetence." Carla felt her world collapse. Without this job, she wouldn't be able to pay next month's rent. Isabella would have to change schools again. All her dreams of studying business and giving her daughter a better life would evaporate once more. That's when Fernando did something unexpected. He took his cell phone out of his pocket and started dialing a number. "Excuse me. I need to make a quick call." "Hi, Amanda. It's me. You need to call our legal advisors." "Yes, right now. We have a situation that requires immediate attention." Fernando spoke softly, but his voice carried an authority that made everyone in the restaurant pay attention. Roberto frowned, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "What's this all about? Are you going to stay on the phone while I solve my problems?" Actually, Fernando hung up and looked directly at Roberto. "Your problems are about to become much bigger than you imagine." Carla noticed a subtle change in Fernando's behavior. His relaxed posture had given way to something more assertive, almost businesslike. He addressed her in a completely different tone than he had used with Roberto. "Carla, could you do me a favor? I need you to document exactly what happened here today. Time, place, witnesses present, exact words that were spoken. Can you do that?" She nodded, confused but intrigued. "Sure, but why?" Because Fernando smiled in a way that made Roberto visibly uncomfortable. Sometimes justice needs proper documentation to work. Roberto snorted. "Justice? What kind of joke is this? Who do you think you are to talk to me about justice? Someone who understands very well how reputations built on unstable foundations work, Fernando replied calmly. What Roberto didn't know was that Fernando had spent the last few weeks not only observing his behavior at the restaurant, but also meticulously investigating his business life. Silver Holdings had a team specializing in due diligence that had discovered fascinating things about Roberto Mendi's thriving companies. Public documents revealed that Roberto's main construction company had been fined 7 times in the last 2 years for labor violations. Black employees were systematically paid lower wages and promoted much less frequently. 3 racial discrimination lawsuits were pending, but they were hushed up through expensive out-of-court settlements. Even more interesting, Roberto had falsified his participation in 2 municipal projects, attributing to himself work that had been carried out by subcontractors while he was on vacation in Europe. The bids had been won through insider information obtained through his father-in-law. You know, Fernando continued, now speaking to the entire restaurant, it's funny how some people confuse privilege with competence. They think they were born with a silver spoon in their mouths because they deserve it. Roberto was turning red with anger. Listen here, whoever you are. Fernando Silva, he introduced himself for the first time, extending his hand to Carla, who shook it hesitantly. And you, Carla, have every right to work in an environment free from racial harassment. The mention of racial harassment made Roberto take a step back. Watch your words, buddy. Accusations can be dangerous. Documented truths are rarely dangerous, Fernando replied. At least not for those on the right side of justice. Carla began to realize that Fernando was not exactly who he appeared to be. The way he talked about documentation, labor rights, and legal advisors suggested someone with far more resources than an ordinary restaurant customer. At that moment, Amanda, the person Fernando had spoken to on the phone, arrived at the restaurant. She was an elegant woman in her 40s, carrying an executive briefcase, and wearing clothes that cost more than Carla's monthly salary. Fernando, she greeted him with professional familiarity. I brought the documents you requested, and our legal team is on its way. Roberto blinked several times, clearly confused by the turn of events. What documents? What legal team? What's this all about? The story, Fernando replied, of how a man, who abuses employees based on racial prejudice, is about to discover that some people are not as defenseless as they seem. Amanda opened the briefcase and handed a few sheets of paper to Fernando, who quickly examined them before smiling. Perfect. Everything's here. Carla watched the scene with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Was it possible that this simple man she had known for months was really someone with the power to confront Roberto? Carla. Fernando addressed her again. You mentioned that you need this job. May I ask what your plans are for the future? The question took Carla by surprise. In the midst of all this confusion, he was interested in her personal goals. I wanted to go to business school. I've always dreamed of having my own business someday. Business? Fernando repeated thoughtfully. Excellent field. And what kind of business? Roberto interrupted impatiently. Look, this is getting ridiculous. I'm leaving and taking my contracts elsewhere. Mr. Peterson, I hope you make the right decision. Actually, Fernando said calmly, I suggest you stay a few more minutes. What I'm about to show you may be educational. There was something in Fernando's tone that made Roberto hesitate. An absolute certainty that contrasted dramatically with the humility he had shown for months as a regular customer. Carla noticed that other restaurant employees had stopped working and were watching the situation. Some customers took out their cell phones, apparently recording or photographing the confrontation. The tension in the air was palpable. Amanda Fernando asked, "Can you explain to Mr. Mendes what our preliminary investigation has revealed about his business practices?" It was at this moment that Roberto began to realize that he might have drastically underestimated the situation. And Carla, observing the shift in the power dynamic happening before her eyes, felt for the first time in months that perhaps justice was not just an abstract concept. What neither of them knew yet was that Fernando had spent the last few weeks not only gathering evidence on Roberto, but also creating opportunities for people like Carla. And the plan that was about to unfold would transform not only their lives, but those of the entire community around them. Under the weight of all those increasingly hostile glances, Roberto finally began to realize that his arrogance had led him into much more dangerous territory than a simple confrontation with an employee. He was about to face consequences that his privileged position had never prepared him for. "Amanda," Fernando asked calmly, "can you show Mr. Mendes the documents about your labor practices over the last 2 years?" Amanda opened the folder and took out a series of photographs and official documents. 7 charges of racial discrimination confirmed by the Ministry of Labor. 16 black employees dismissed without just cause after reporting harassment. 3 ongoing lawsuits for systematic wage differences based on skin color. Roberto laughed nervously. These are misunderstandings. Normal administrative problems in any large company." And this Amanda showed a second stack of papers. Bids, one with privileged information obtained through your father, Councilman Mendes. 2 municipal projects falsely attributed to your company while you were on vacation in France. The color drained from Roberto's face. Who the hell are you?" Fernando smiled for the first time that night. "Fernando Silva, CEO of Silva Holdings. You may have heard of us. We acquire companies with management problems and turn them into ethical and profitable businesses." The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Carla felt as if she were watching a movie, unable to fully process what was happening. "You know," Fernando continued, now addressing the entire restaurant as if it were an audience, "I've spent the last 6 months observing this establishment. Not as a regular customer, but evaluating a possible acquisition. And do you know what I discovered?" Roberto tried to interrupt, but Fernando raised his hand. "I discovered that the most competent, dedicated, and respectful employee in this place has been systematically humiliated by a man who confuses inherited privilege with earned competence." Amanda took a tablet out of her briefcase. "Mr. Mendes, would you like to see the video we've compiled over the last 2 months? Every humiliation, every racist comment, every act of arrogance has been documented." On the screen were images of Roberto on different occasions, yelling at black employees, making derogatory comments, treating white people with completely different respect. Clear audio, precise dates, multiple angles. This is invasion of privacy," Roberto stammered. "Actually," Fernando replied calmly, "these are public spaces, and our legal team has confirmed that everything was collected within the law." Carla watched Roberto crumble before her eyes. The man who minutes earlier had treated her as inferior was now visibly sweating, his hand shaking as he realized the magnitude of the situation. "Carla," Fernando addressed her. "You mentioned that you dream of owning your own business. How about we start today?" She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "Silva Holdings is acquiring this restaurant, and I'm offering you a 35% stake to manage the complete transformation of this establishment. Mr. Peterson, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, stepped forward. "Mr. Silver, I did not authorize any sale." "Actually," Amanda smiled. "Your debt to the bank was purchased by our company 3 weeks ago. Technically, we already own it. We are just formalizing the transition." Roberto exploded. "This is a setup. You planned all this to humiliate me." "No," Fernando replied with devastating calm. "We planned all this to create justice. The humiliation was just a natural consequence of your own actions." Amanda pulled out more documents. "Mr. Mendes, we also discovered your gambling debts. $180,000 at online casinos in the last 6 months. Money embezzled from your construction company's payroll." Roberto staggered. "How do you know this?" "When you decide to systematically destroy the dignity of working people," Fernando explained, "you eventually find someone with the resources to investigate who you really are." Carla finally found her voice. You did all this for me." "Not just for you," Fernando replied honestly. "For all the people like you who suffer in silence while privileged mediocrities abuse power they don't deserve." Roberto made one last desperate attempt. "My father will hear about this. He has influence in this city." "Your father," Amanda interjected softly, "received a complete dossier on your illegal activities an hour ago. He is currently drafting a public letter distancing himself from your actions to save his own political career." The devastation on Roberto's face was complete. In a matter of minutes, he had lost his company, his reputation, his family support, and any illusion of power he had. "Do you know what the difference is between us, Roberto?" Fernando asked, approaching him one last time. "You were born at the top and used that position to push others down. I built my empire by elevating competent people regardless of their background." Fernando turned to Carla. "Do you accept the proposal to transform this place into something that honors hard-working people like you?" Carla, with tears in her eyes, nodded. "I accept." "Excellent. Amanda, can you prepare the contracts? And Mr. Mendes?" Fernando looked at Roberto one last time. "I suggest you use the next few months to learn humility. You'll need it." Roberto staggered out of the restaurant, leaving behind not only his ruined reputation, but also the certainty that he had completely underestimated the power of people he considered inferior. The other customers began to applaud spontaneously. Carla, still processing the complete turnaround in her life, realized that she had just witnessed not only justice being done, but a lesson in how true power always recognizes and elevates competence, regardless of where it comes from. But the most profound transformation was yet to come. And it would change not only their lives, but the entire community surrounding that small restaurant that was about to become much more than anyone had ever imagined. 6 months later, Carla adjusted her new blazer, as she watched the hustle and bustle of what was now called the Green Valley Community Restaurant and Training Center. The place had become much more than just a restaurant. It was a professional training center where young people from the community learned culinary and administrative skills. "Mom, can I help check the online orders?" Isabella asked, sitting at a table near the counter, doing her homework from the private school she now attended. "Of course, sweetheart," Carla smiled, still getting used to her new reality. As a managing partner, she earned more in a month than she used to earn in 6. But what made her most proud was seeing Roberto's former employees working there, all with decent salaries and real opportunities for growth. Fernando appeared carrying a stack of certificates. 12 more people completed the training program this week. 3 have already gotten jobs at other restaurants in the chain. Carla's transformation had been impressive. She had discovered a natural aptitude for leadership and management that surprised even Fernando. In a few months, she had developed customer service systems, training programs, and even a line of dishes that became famous in the city. "And what's the news about Roberto?" Carla asked, more out of curiosity than revenge. "The construction company went bankrupt for good last week," Fernando replied calmly. "The employees were relocated to other companies or received fair compensation. Roberto, well, he's working as a salesman in a building materials store." Roberto's downfall had been complete and irreversible. Investigations revealed not only systematic racial discrimination, but also tax fraud, slave labor, and active corruption. His father-in-law had publicly distanced himself. His former friends from the exclusive club avoided him, and his wife had filed for divorce, taking half of the remaining assets. More painful for Roberto was realizing that no one felt sorry for him. The former employees he had humiliated were now thriving elsewhere, while he faced the reality of working honestly for a modest salary for the first time in his life. "You know," Carla reflected watching the constant movement in the restaurant. "A year ago, I just wanted him to respect me. Today, I realized that people like Roberto will never change. They only stop doing harm when they lose the power to do so." Fernando nodded. "The best revenge is not to destroy someone out of cruelty. It is to build something so great that the person becomes irrelevant." Isabella looked up from her homework. "Mom, my teacher said you're going to give a talk at school about female entrepreneurship." "That's right." Carla smiled, remembering the girl who had been crying behind the counter 6 months earlier. "I'm going to tell the children that no matter where you were born or what color you are, competence and character always win in the end." Green Valley had become a benchmark in the city. Politicians visited to learn about the social program. Business people wanted to replicate the model, and the local community had found a space where dignity and opportunity went hand in hand. Roberto, for his part, discovered daily what it meant to be treated as just another employee. No privileges, no family protection, no shortcuts. For the first time in his life, he was learning the real value of honest work and respect earned through competence. "There's one thing that always intrigues me," Isabella commented. "Why are some people born thinking they are better than others?" Carla thought carefully before answering. "Because they confuse privilege with merit, my love. They think they were lucky because they were special, when in fact they were special because they were lucky." Fernando watched mother and daughter talking and smiled. He had invested in many companies throughout his career, but he had never seen a transformation as complete as Carla's. She had not only learned how to run a business, she had become a leader who inspired others to believe in their own abilities. "The most important thing," Carla continued, "is that when you achieve something through your own efforts, no one can take it away from you." Roberto lost everything because he never really had anything. It was all borrowed from his family and luck. As the sun set over Green Valley, Carla watched families eating dinner, employees smiling as they worked, and young people in training learning skills that would change their lives. She had turned humiliation into purpose, injustice into opportunity. Roberto had tried to destroy a hard-working, competent woman, but ended up revealing his own mediocrity. True justice wasn't seeing him suffer. It was building something so beautiful that his malicious actions became just a small bump in the road to something much greater. If this story of overcoming adversity and justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that the best revenge will always be your own success.